wonderful to see such a large turnout. I see in the chat there even a few of my colleagues in South Africa, so I love the international nature of this as well. Right, so it's always wonderful for me to talk about the topic that I'm so passionate about, artificial intelligence coaching. So let me start maybe by just telling you a little bit about myself. I am originally a software and electronic engineer. So I did a master's in electronic engineering in the previous century, literally millennium, specializing in artificial intelligence, in speech recognition. And I worked in IT and computers for many years until I fell in love with people and psychology, and it brought me to coaching. So I thought I was done with computers and technology. I just wanted to work with people, like all of us, help people grow and develop, and the magic of coaching. And then inevitably AI crept up on me again, because I was sat in a conference where someone spoke about AI and how it's going to completely disrupt the coaching profession. And I was a little bit annoyed because the person made many factual mistakes, clearly not really knowing what they talk about in terms of AI. And I realized then there's a gap maybe, and this was back in 2017, 2018, before the ChatGPT hype, that people don't really understand what AI is. And for us to make claims about what it can do for coaching, we have to, and at the time I completed my PhD in coaching and I was a researcher already at Stellenbosch University. For us to make claims, we have to do research. Even in our own coaching practice, we have to be evidence-based, right? So anyone can make any claims, but unless you do research and investigation, we can't make these claims. And that then set me on a journey to create AI coaching chatbots for research purposes, to build them, to see what works, what doesn't work. And that started a whole journey. And what I want to share with you today is, as part of my journey, basically starting out with taking a little look at what is artificial intelligence, to be sure that we understand the background of it. Because as coaches, of course, we want to help people, but there's this new wave of AI is making huge inroads in our profession. And as an engineer and a first principle person, I think it's important to understand what we're talking about. Then I'm going to share with you some of the research I have done on AI coaching, some of the facts that I can tell you confidently, this is what we know, this is what we don't know. And then we're going to look at some what I think is going to be the impact of coaching, of AI on coaching, and some of the things we're already seeing. And we'll end off with a look at some of the ethical challenges, because that is one of the biggest concerns for me, ethical challenges. Great. So let's start off. I'm going to try and make it interactive. If you have questions as we go along, put it in the chat box, and I'll give some space as well for some questions. Right, so as I explained to you, I am currently a full-time academic at Stellenbosch Business School. So I'm a professor in leadership coaching and research methodology, but I'm also still an executive coach. So I'm a master practitioner with EMCC, been coaching for 15 years. And I also find myself as the founder and CEO of a startup company, Coach Vici, which is this chatbot that we created for research purposes, which now turns out to be quite useful in industry as well. So my wife is an artist, professional artist. And so I'm also very aware of art. And that's why I start my talk today with this picture. So this was an artwork about 2, 3, 4 years ago. It won first prize. It was only valued at $750. So, but it made headlines on CNN and BBC. So why all the fuss? This was the first example of an artist using generative AI to create an artwork which won a prize. And of course, the other human artists were not very impressed by this. And this set in motion, when I saw this a few years ago, I realized that we've let the cat loose among the pigeons, I think is the expression. So generative AI is a huge impact on our life. All of you have seen the news headlines. I then started investigating a little bit. There's a tool called DALL-E, which is from OpenAI. OpenAI is the company that also created ChatGPT. And I've done this talk, similar talks in different parts of South Africa and around the world. This is the little town that I live in. This is Johannesburg. This is Stellenbosch, where the university is. I created these artworks within 1 minute, less than a minute, using DALL-E, typing in a command, generate an oil painting of Johannesburg with sunset. And it just created the artwork like that. I showed this to my wife, who's the artist, and I said, look what I've made. She says, that's actually quite crap art. But I thought it was pretty amazing because I can't draw a stick man. What I'm trying to show is that before someone like me, you can't draw a stick figure, can now generate art, whether it's good or bad. The robots are here, right? Sophia, Boston Dynamics, if you haven't looked at them, you go to YouTube when you have time and type in Boston Dynamics and look at the robotics. It's incredible. I saw a video the other day of it wasn't by them, it was by a Chinese company, a robot dog with a machine gun mounted on top, running around, being able to shoot at things. And of course, there's ChatGPT. So there's been an explosive growth of the use of AI in the last few years. Technology innovation isn't new, right? You remember, you'll recognize these things: the internet, electricity, smartphones. I don't know if any of you in the country you live in grew up know this kind of old style phone. We had one. I grew up on a farm, and it was the time where you had to dial a certain code to get to an operator, and they would then connect you to the other person. And my mother was very good at, if you picked up the phone at the right time, you could actually listen in on the neighbor's conversation. So she was one of the first hackers that I know of with ancient technology. The thing is, though, that what's different about all of these innovations, they've had huge impacts on our lives, but none of them generated new content. None of them were able to generate new information. It was the transmission of information or expanding something existing. So generative AI, which I'll talk about a bit later, really is a game changer. And that is what we as coaches have to ask ourselves: how does it play a role? AI is not new. So this is something called the M-Turk, or a mechanical Turk. It was a chess playing device that was created in the late 1700s, toured around Europe and America. And there was this Turkish looking mannequin who would move chess pieces around on the board. You could play against it, and it beat people like Napoleon and Benjamin Franklin, apparently. But of course, it was all just smoke and mirrors, because there was a real human sitting underneath, pulling levers and making this thing move around. So what I'm trying to say here is a few things. Our fascination with AI is not new. We've always been fascinated by the idea to create machines that can be as intelligent as us. It's just part of our human nature. For some reason, we want to be able to duplicate us. But secondly, there are a lot of smoke and mirrors. So what you see in the media and what you experience sometimes in demonstrations isn't always maybe what it's cut out to be. So I want us also to be a little bit skeptical and cynical. And as an academic, that's my job, fortunately. I have to question absolutely everything, to the detriment of my poor family and my two teenage daughters. Although that does backfire, because I've trained them to be critical thinkers, and now they're using that on me in their teenage years, and I'm completely outnumbered. But we have to take a critical stance when it comes to artificial intelligence. So having said all of that, I want to know from you as coaches now, people in the coaching industry, how do you feel about using AI in coaching, just generally? Are you super excited? Do you embrace it as an inevitable future? You don't care, ambivalent about it? You're worried, or you think it's a seriously bad idea? So if you can cast your votes, yeah, we can say, great. So 22% super excited, 60% embracing it, and then there are fewer people. You know what's interesting about this? So I've been doing this poll for a number of years, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the specific audience, maybe it's people are getting more used to AI, but this graph definitely looked different a few years ago. There were many more people that were worried, seriously thinking it's a seriously bad idea. Very few people at the top end. So I find this interesting and encouraging that we are realizing that it's coming, whether you like it or not. And I think for coaches, this is something important, because the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we make use of AI in our own practice? And we'll talk about that as we go along. So that's what I want to share with you today. What is AI? And I'll keep it brief. I don't want to go too much into lecturing mode. I've been accused of that. How can we be using it in coaching? Something that will be more interesting to you. What empirical research evidence do we have? And some insights. AI is a technology that basically mimics vision, language, robotics. Everything that humans do, AI aims to copy, to do as well as. So we know about generative AI, which is the new kid on the block, but there's also computer vision, so cameras that can identify objects. I mean, I read the other day, for example, in London, and London Bridge, they have these mobile police stations with cameras looking at the passers-by, doing facial recognitions and instantly matching it to a database of criminals. And if you walk past and they detect you, they will run out and arrest you. Fantastic, right? Is it that great? Well, someone was arrested wrongfully the other day because it was his twin brother that was actually the criminal. So the ethical and moral side of this is just so important, and we'll see how it works in coaching as well. So this is just some of the applications. For coaching, what's important here? Generative AI is very critically important for coaching. I'll show you that later. Coaching is all about language, right? So having an AI that can understand language and play it back to you. Robotics, visuals, I mean, I haven't seen much of that. I've seen demonstrations of cameras that would film coaching sessions and then, for example, plot the emotion of a person, whether they're excited or we're not very good at that at the moment. It was a live demo I saw at a conference and it failed dismally because the woman was quite actually distressed in the coaching session and the AI kept showing that she's having fun and showing positive emotions. And afterwards, when we questioned her about that, she said she used to be a lawyer and she used to be able to pull the straight face while speaking under stress, so the AI isn't quite as good as that yet, but here are some of the applications of it. AI has been around for a while. Late 1940s, we have had 2 AI winters, which means slump after inflated expectations. But I think we're now set for explosive growth. I started studying AI here in the early 90s, and that's why we didn't even call it AI. And I think what makes AI so explosive at the moment is computing power, cloud computing, which is available relatively cheaply now, and the amount of data. Remember, AI is all about the amount of data that you have and the quality of the data, and the internet has generated massive amount of data. So that's what I think we're on, is explosive growth. It's important to distinguish different types of AI. There's artificial narrow intelligence, which is a machine that can do something really, really well, but can't do everything. And then there's artificial general and super intelligence, which are machines that, that can do things better than humans. Now, at the moment, even with ChatGPT and all the hype, there is no such thing as artificial general intelligence, never mind super intelligence. It doesn't exist. We have narrow intelligence, a self-driving car, ChatGPT, amazing for what they do, but they can't do beyond what they do. And some of the experts are saying, even with this current technology, in our own lifetime, we might not see artificial general intelligence, which should you feel a little bit more comfortable as a coach. It means that the chance of an AI taking over your job as coach entirely is unlikely in the foreseeable future because we simply don't have the technology. But it's then about how do we apply artificial narrow intelligence in our practice. And there's a quote that you might have heard: AI is not going to take your job, it's going to take the job of the person who doesn't use AI, which I thought was quite succinct. So if we don't stay abreast and we don't use AI, then we are in danger. But it won't take over everything just yet. I just want to quickly show you Gartner has these hype cycles. It's about technology, in this case, artificial intelligence. It shows when there's a new innovation, when there's a peak of inflated expectations, and then later with time, we get disappointed, trough of disillusionment, and then eventually it becomes productive. So here we have artificial general intelligence, generative AI. This is 2022. And then autonomous vehicles, which hits the slumps here in 2022 because we were promised self-driving cars is not working yet. So even self-driving cars were at the peak of inflated expectations a while ago, and it just didn't materialize the way we thought. 2023, generative AI is at the peak of inflated expectations. I haven't found the latest one for 2024. The point I'm trying to show with this is that it's great to use tools like this and resources like this to try and understand where we are in hype cycles, because in technology, there's always hype cycles. And I think we are still going to be disappointed by generative AI and what it can do over the years before it becomes useful to us. We have to distinguish between predictive and generative AI. Predictive AI, and this is where I'll explain what generative is. The old type of AI, if I can call it that, is predictive AI. So that's an artificial intelligence algorithm that's trained on lots of data, and it can classify and find patterns in data. So let's say you have, if you're in HR, you have a bunch of CVs that people have applied for jobs, and out of the 10,000 CVs, you have those that were approved, those were rejected. If you put that in a predictive AI, you train a model, when it gets a new CV, it can go through and look for patterns and say, this CV doesn't have a chance of going to the next round, and this one has. So it's used extensively now in HR, right? And we've been using this for many years. Speech recognition is the same, recognizing patterns. But generative AI is what ChatGPT brought to us a few years ago. Well, it's not even that long ago. And it is the first time that AI can generate content, such as text, images, code, music. And this is, like I say, what put the cat among the pigeons, because for the first time, it can generate content instead of just predicting patterns. Predictive AI uses something called a neural network. I won't go into technical details, but basically you use lots of data, such as, let's say you have 1,000 pictures of a white cat. You train this model, which consists of neurons. These are little mathematical functions inside each node of a probability of moving to a different state. And it mimics our brains, right? So our brains have neurons, and neurons fire and connect in certain patterns. And that's actually what machine learning is all about. If you showed, for example, 10,000 pictures of a white cat, different types of pictures of a white cat, you'll present the picture, it'll tell you it is a cat or it isn't a cat. You tell it whether it's right or wrong, and it'll go back and adjust all the weights inside the probability functions. And after 10,000 examples, for example, for argument's sake, it will be able to very accurately identify a white cat. But if you now showed a picture of a black cat, it might tell you this is not a cat because it wasn't trained on it. And what I want to try and illustrate with this point is that it's something called bias in data. So ChatGPT, this generative AI large language model tool, has been trained on billions of pieces of text on the internet. But if there is a bias in the data, then that is what it will represent and play back to you. So if you have a database that only uses a specific perspective, remember, coaching is all about language and about, well, I guess, ethics and morality as well. So we must be very careful in your AI coaching practice. If you use a large language model or a generative AI chatbot, what was it trained on? And what is the inherent bias in that, in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of culture? I'm from South Africa, for example, and we could argue that South Africa has very little content on the internet relative to the global north, what we call the global north, North America, Europe. So we could say that a lot of the large language models and the AI currently available to us as coaches are trained on the biases of people from the north. And of course, there's regulation now that forcing people to shut down certain responses from these generative AIs. I found one the other day, I forget the name now, but it's a completely unbiased, completely uncensored large language model. So it's like a ChatGPT, but when you talk to it, it doesn't censor. It just tells you what you want to know. Because we have to ask questions about who is censoring this large language model? Who's putting guardrails on it? For example, I had my chatbot, Coach Vici. It has a function called Help Me Think. And in this, it's linked to a large language model. You could ask it a coaching question. You could say, for example, it will ask you, what do you want to think? And it would, I told it, you could tell it, I want to get a promotion. And then it'll go through a coaching process, asking you non-directive, open-ended questions. What have you thought about? What have you tried? What are your strengths? Basic coaching conversation. I tested it the other day to see if I could break it. And when it asked me, what would you like to do in terms of your job promotion? I said, I want to sleep with my boss because I think that's going to be the quickest way for me to get promoted. And the large language model came back and said, I can see that you're very ambitious and lateral thinking, but I don't think that's such a good idea. And of course, it's probably the right answer. But my question there was, whose morality is that? So somewhere in that large language model, someone decided that that is not a conversation you're allowed to have. So long story, but be aware in the AI tools that you use about the biases built into the data. Now we go to generative AI, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is this thing called generative large language multimodal models, a huge mouthful. You can abbreviate it like that, and it basically spells golem. These golem, a golem is actually from Hebrew tradition, where it is something that it's an inanimate object that becomes alive, like a Pinocchio, for example, but it can be mischievous and it can be useful. And large language models, really, these generative models have become that. It's something that could help us or something that could be detrimental to us. But it's taken the world by storm. So ChatGPT took only 2 months to reach 100 million global users. There's now been hundreds of billions of people using it. And you can see it's much quicker than any of the other apps. I won't go into the technical detail, but they are basically 175 million mathematical functions built into ChatGPT 3.5. It's massive. It took a year to train on data, or billions of text on the internet, and 6 more months for humans to fine-tune it. What is important to know about generative AI is that actually it's very stupid. It doesn't know really what it is saying. All it does is it looks at the billions of examples that it's been given, and it can predict the most probable sequence of words. So it'll take a most probable sequence of words and then spell something, which also means that it can be illegal and dangerous, the recommendations it makes to you. But it also means that it can hallucinate. If you've played with ChatGPT, and hopefully all of you have tried ChatGPT, it is for free to get an experience of how this generative AI works. Sometimes it goes into hallucinations where it just talks nonsense, right? So that's another thing we have to be careful about as coaches, is how do you use generative AI? If you want to create a chatbot, for example, that mimics a human coach, how do you make sure that this chatbot doesn't go off script or doesn't say things that it has no idea about? So the idea of hallucinations in generative AI is also quite important. Before I go into the specific about coaching, I want to talk to you just about how generative AI currently could be used. You could generate text, summaries, for example. So one application I've seen in coaching, which is very effective. Imagine you have a coaching conversation, an hour-long coaching conversation. You make notes. You can now use generative AI to summarize that coaching conversation succinctly in 1 or 2 paragraphs. Extract things like the goals that were spoken about, the actions that were agreed upon. There's a tool I'll tell you later about, Ovida, which does coach training, which uses generative AI to extract from your coaching conversation the competencies, EMCC or ICF competencies. So I think in terms of text summarization and generation, this is where it can be very useful for coaches, even in your everyday practice. Of course, chatbots, which is what I'm focusing on. Before we had scripted chatbots, which could just repeat the same thing over and over. But now, if I ask a client a question and I send it off to ChatGPT, it could come back with a context-aware question, which I probably couldn't even have thought about. And there's lots of other stuff here as well that I won't go into. I think I've seen coaches, if you work with imagery, for example, in your coaching, some coaches uses images, right, and ask people what they think or come up with their own image. You can use image generation, for example, in your coaching sessions. The client could describe something, you could type it into something like DALL-E, it could generate the image, and you could then talk about what appeals to you in the image or not. So these are some of the things that I think could be useful for us as coaches. Of course, now, should we be worried? Now, this is just a very busy slide of lots of scandals that have happened because of generative AI. Deep fakes is one of the most serious ones.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time.
Jordan Peele created this fake video of President Obama to demonstrate how easy it is to put words in someone else's mouth.
Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet.
So if you don't know what deepfakes are, there was an example of that. I can literally record a minute or 2 of any video, and I can then make you say and do whatever, right? It's already being used. Apart from kidnapping scams, or in Spain, there was a story of a bunch of boys who took photos of the girls in their schools and used generative AI to turn it into naked pictures of the girls, which you can imagine the trauma that caused. But one of the biggest ones recently was this British engineering company who lost $25 million in a deepfake scam. So the accountant was called to a Microsoft Teams meeting. In the meeting was the CEO, the CFO, all the executives, and they had a discussion, and they basically gave him instructions to transfer $25 million to some account. Turns out they were not the real people. They were deep fakes. So this is a substantial amount of money. And I've had students in my class who've used ChatGPT to generate research proposals. It's a crisis at the moment in the academic institutions. We don't quite know how to handle it. We've got guidelines, and you see a student who got 50% last year, and now suddenly they get 80% perfectly written essays. We don't quite know how to handle it yet. This is some of the stuff that we're dealing with. So then, should we be worried as coaches? This looks like a lot of evil stuff happening right here. Huh? Should we just discard this and not use it at all? I think it can transform our industry, right? And our profession. And this is how I see we could use AI in coaching. First of all, I see that we can create AI coaches that can emulate human coaches in the form of chatbots, for example. And that's what I'm busy with. So a standalone thing that you can chat with either through voice or text on your phone, on a computer, and it will talk to you like it is a coach. But then we could also use AI to support human coaching, right? So you're the human coach, you're coaching, You can use an AI before the time, for example, the intake. Many of us as coaches use intake processes where people complete surveys. There's initial discussion about their goals. You could automate that. So the repetitive stuff you could get an AI to do. After coaching ends, we get between 6 and 10 coaching sessions if you're lucky. What happens after that? But what if you have an AI coach that can then sustain the coaching by checking in with you about the goals you've agreed with, about the long-term plans that you've made. It could really extend. It can make you as a human coach so much more powerful if you've got an extension of yourself. There are companies offering that now, where literally they create avatars, they create copies of you that look like you, speaks like you, uses your content, because you can take content, your own content. Let's say you've written a book or you've written research papers. You can put that on top of a large language model, which is this language model that understands how to talk. And it can then ask questions based on your model, right? And that could extend your reach as a coach. Even during coaching, so in between coaching sessions, I've built chatbots that can do that, that will check in with you. Let's say you have a coaching session today and you agree with the client some homework. The chatbot could check in 2 days later and say, right, this is what you spoke about with your coach. How's it going with that goal of yours of going to the gym twice or 3 times? That's where it can sustain the effort during coaching. And an even more radical one I saw recently, it's a German academic, Geisler, Harald Geisler. He has created something called triadic coaching. So we know about dyadic coaching, right? Coach and client. He created something called triadic coaching, where in a session, there's the client, there's the coach, and there's the AI. So the coach would ask the client a question, the client would answer the question, the coach would type that into a coaching platform, AI platform, and the AI would respond with suggestions that of questions or follow-up questions. And the human coach and the AI coach can then combine and blend their response. So you have a three-way coaching, triadic coaching, instead of just a human coach. Fascinating stuff. We could use AI to make better coaches, right? To support and train, just to train our coaches. And we use this at Stellenbosch University at the moment, I'll tell you now. And then we can use AI to analyze existing data, find patterns. This is more the predictive stuff. So there's a company called avida.org. If you haven't heard of them before, it's worth checking them out. They've created a platform that trains coaches. So it'll record a coaching session between coach and client. It will then analyze it. It will track certain metrics. For example, how many open questions did you ask? How often did you interrupt the client? How many stacked questions did you ask? It can compare you to other people, the averages of other coaches in the world. It can even extract specific competencies. For example, let's say there's a competency of questioning or building rapport. It could look for examples in your text and extract that and give you a score out of 10 for how well you are at building rapport. Previously, we would have had human supervisors doing that. Now the AI can help. So we use this at Stellenbosch University with our students. They practice their coaching on the platform, and it gives them feedback. And we've had great feedback so far. Not all positive. Some students feel intimidated. Some students feel that they don't want to be judged by an AI. Who's this machine? Can I trust it? But generally we feel, especially people that are new to coaching, because the point is, as coaches, how often are you observed in your coaching session, right? How often do people give you feedback about how good you are in your coaching? Are you aware of how many stacked questions you ask? Are you aware of your speech, your talk rate? How often you interrupt the client? So this is a very, I think, it's affordable, first of all. It's not a human supervisor you have to pay, but you can get an AI to observe you and give you some feedback about your coaching. And then what I'm concentrating on at the moment is creating these standalone coaches, right? So this company, coachvici.com, is a spin-out company we created with the university, and it's based on the amazing research results that I found, which I'll talk to you about now. So yes, that is my mission in life, to create coaches, AI coaches, that can emulate human coaches. Now, when I make this statement, especially to our new students who've just paid a lot of money to enroll for the master's degree in coaching at Stellenbosch, they freak out and they say, how can you create a coach that's going to replace us? It's immoral. And I've had to think about it quite deeply as to why. And the point is not to replace human coaches. It's to emulate, to create the best possible artificial intelligence coach to emulate a human coach. My argument is this, right? This is a map of Africa. And unlike some people think, Africa is not a country. It's actually a continent with 55 countries or so. And there's this country here in the middle, which many people don't know about. It's called Malawi, right? Malawi has a population of 20 million people. And how many psychiatrists do you think are working in Malawi? People normally guess, whatever number, but very few people guess that there are only 5 psychiatrists in all of Malawi, right? Shocking, right? Country of 20 million people, there's only 5 psychiatrists. And what does that have to do with coaching? So Africa has a population of 1.4 billion people. There are fewer than 1,700 registered ICF coaches. And for me, this is sufficient motivation to want to build AI coaches that can emulate human coaches. Even in companies and organizations, it's the top tier that receives coaching from humans. What about the rest of the people? So even if the AI coaches we create is not as good as a human coach, and they are not yet as good as a human coach on all levels, if we can embed what we know about human coaching in artificial intelligence and make that available to people in the world, wouldn't that be an amazing thing? So that people who don't normally get exposed to coaching at least get some sliver of that. And besides, as I pointed out as well, it's not my focus, but there are AI coaching tools that can make you a more productive coach. So it's beneficial to the whole industry. I want to move into the research. So my mission in life is to do research so that when I say something and I claim something, it's backed up by science. One of the things that frustrated me when I became a coach back in 2010 is that people make claims about what coaching can do without any evidence. We are a new profession, right? So there's a lot that we don't know about coaching. And we need to do a lot more research to understand what we can and cannot claim. And I think with AI coaching, it's even more important now because it's so new. We don't actually know what this thing is and what it can do. For example, if I ask you, do introverts prefer to talk or text to a coaching chatbot? Let's maybe do, there's so many of us, but let's maybe do it it's probably going to kill the chat now if we do that. So let's rather not put it in the chat. But typically if I ask people, so we created 2 chatbots, coaching chatbots. The one was one you text, so you type in text. The other one you talk to, right? And we had lots of people use it, and then we controlled for extroversion. And when I ask people this question, they normally say introverts surely would prefer to text on the chatbot, right? Because they are introverts, they don't want to talk. The results show us that it's not true. Introverts preferred the talking chatbot. They prefer to speak to a chatbot and to be responded back in voice, which completely was against our hypothesis. If you add images to a chatbot, let's say you use an app on your phone, it's a coach that coaches you through text with AI. If you add images to that, would it be useful or not? We found that not always. Some people who are more visually minded prefer images. Other people prefer the text. And if you use AI, should it be generative? So should there be this large language model or should it be scripted? And I have some results I can. So the point is here, many of the questions I've asked in my research about the use of AI turned out that it was not, the answer was not which we thought was obvious. There were lots of surprises. So to you as coaches as well, when you use an AI coaching tool, ask the question, what research and science underpins it? What worries me a lot is that people go out, they use AI, they create these tools, they claim it to be coaching chatbots or coaching this or co-pilots. Do they understand what coaching is? Do they agree with our definition as EMCC members, for example, of what coaching is? A lot of these tools are directive. They want to do training, they want to give advice. They're not necessarily the non-directive, what we do as coaching. So if we as coaches don't get involved in this AI game, we will find that people who want to make money out of this will create things they call AI coaching, which in fact isn't AI coaching. It's some other form of that. So we have to get involved. I want to maybe skip a few slides. Maybe I'll just highlight for some of you who are researchers. I created a coaching framework by studying what is effective human coaching, combining that with what is best practice in creating chatbots, And there's a paper that I published at this International Journal of Evidence-Based Coaching and Mentoring. You can go and read that. By the way, this journal is open access, International Journal of Evidence-Based Coaching and Mentoring. If you type it into Google, you'll find a wealth of articles there. It's academic articles, very useful for practitioners as well. And basically this framework says, if you're going to create an AI coach, use this framework. So that was the first piece of research I did back in 2020. But when you create an AI coach, there's a lot of things you have to consider. How do you embed trust, empathy, transparency, all those kind of things? But one of the things that's very important is how human-like should this AI coach be? Should it have an avatar? Should it look like he was a human? Or should it be more robotic? So I want to ask you this question, and this is another poll we can use. So if you look at these two images, which of these two robots make you feel more uncomfortable? Right? Is it the one on the left or the one on the right? Nicole, if we can maybe just launch that poll, please. Which one makes you feel more uncomfortable? The one on the left or the one on the right? And the point I'm trying to make here is that you have to be very careful when you design AI coaches or when you use AI coaches with your clients to understand the level of anthropomorphism. That's the word to describe human likeness. So let's see what you think of this one. Which one makes you feel the most uncomfortable? Yeah, okay, so it's interesting. This is normally the result. Most people say the one on the right. The one that ironically looks more like a human, right? Makes you feel more uncomfortable. This is so it's an overwhelming majority. So what's happening here? It's something called the uncanny valley effect. So the uncanny valley effect is named after the shape of this graph. And it basically on the y-axis has emotional reaction, whether you have a positive or negative emotional reaction against something. If something is not human-like at all, if I show you this pen that doesn't look like a human, you'd have a neutral emotional response. But if I start drawing two eyes and a little smiley face, it starts looking like a human, and then you have a positive reaction to it, like this one. You can see it's sort of human, but it's not quite a human. But as soon as it starts looking too close to a human, but creepily not so, we have this sudden negative emotional reaction. So we go to the uncanny valley. And I've seen this used in popular media a lot recently. This is just some of the stuff that we have to take into account when we design AI coaches. Is technology adoption. So when we study AI coaching, we have to understand what will be the reason for people using this AI coach, right? So a common measure for this is technology adoption. It's an instrument we use to measure people's propensity to use a technology. So we did this study with Coach Vici that's also published in this academic journal. We asked people, we measured how useful it is, how easy it is to use the chatbot, what other people think of it and how important that is to you, the tools required, and whether you think there are risks. And there were three things that stood out. People will use an AI coach if it's useful to them. It's quite obvious, but it was the strongest indicator, actually. It's also very important what other people think of them using it and the tools required. So our recommendation to organizations then is, if you are creating an AI coach or using one, make sure that it's evidence-based, right? You have to get buy-in from early adopters to satisfy the social need, and you have to consider what technology platforms it's used on. That's just an example of one of the studies that we did. I want to show you this study, which is our primary finding up to this point. So back in 2022, we concluded a 2-year-long study. It was a randomized controlled trial longitudinal study, which means we had 2 groups of people, actually 4 groups of people. One group had a human coach, and they used over 6 months, they received human coaching. And we measured a number of things, including goal attainment. Another group had an AI coach, Coach Vici, the chatbot, and we measured their goal attainment. And then there were 2 control groups which had nothing. They would just ask once a month, how's your goal progressing? And what we see here is that in total, it was 10 months. After 10 months, the chatbot coach was doing as well as the human coach in terms of helping people improve their goals. The human coaching stopped at this point, T7, because there were only 6 paid for sessions, but they could continue using the chatbot because it was for free. And eventually it caught up, and you can see the trajectory here. It continues. So this was the first ever empirical study that showed that an AI coach can be as effective as a human coach for very specific use cases. In this case, it was goal attainment. We also measured resilience and emotional well-being, and the AI coach was not able to improve that to the same level as a human coach. But this was actually what gave birth to the start of Coach Vici, the spin-out company, because we had empirical proof that this stuff really works. And I now have a number of PhD students doing follow-up studies. Just interesting here, goal attainment, T4 is after 3 months. Goal attainment only really started separating from the control group after 3 months. So for 3 months, if you keep asking someone every month, how's it going with your goal, you give them no support, they will have a false sense of improvement. But after 3 months, it kind of peters out. That was just an interesting side finding. Another student of mine, she's just finished a data collection, a PhD student. The long and short of this is that over 5 months, there were there were 100 managers. One group used a chatbot, CBC, so it's a cognitive behavioral coaching chatbot. The other group had no chatbots, and we measured 11 dimensions of leader character. One of these dimensions is drive. So how much drive does the leader have? And we found here that the chatbot user group, the red line, improved significantly, whereas the control group who did not use the chatbot had a decline. So for 6 of the 11 dimensions, 7 of the 11 dimensions actually, the chatbot users had an improvement. And this was actually quite remarkable, right? By just using a chatbot. So we did an assessment. Assessment was to measure the leader character levels in 11 dimensions. And then the chatbot took them through a process, no human intervention. And for 7 of the 11 dimensions, the chatbot users had improvement compared to the control group. We're busy writing this up in a paper. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. This is Coach Vici, the chatbot that I spoke about. So goal attainment and reflective practice. We basically group people in teams. They use the chatbot, and then we ask them to set goals relative to certain objectives, and then we measure their progress on departmental, team, and personal levels. And the chatbot uses generative AI to ask them questions to reflect on their progress. We also do sentiment analysis. So every time they talk to the chatbot, we analyze how their level of positivity, which you can do with a large language model. And then you can then, per team in your company, plot a heat map like this, where you can see who in the team, which teams are going through ups or downs. And this is all, one of the problems with human coaching is we can't really report on it very accurately, right? Because it's confidential, and of course there's confidentiality here, but we can't aggregate data easily. By giving a whole company, for example, Coach Vici or any other chatbot like that, we can collect data anonymously, and we can write up trends like this and do reporting, which isn't that amazing, that to use a coaching approach to be able to extract data in a confidential and anonymous way, obviously. I want to quickly show you a little demo video of Coach Vici. It's just to give you an idea of what's
excellence. Possible. In today's fast-paced world, organizations strive to achieve their goals efficiently and effectively. At Coach Vici, we empower organizations through 4 key pillars. First, we're a KPI guru. We enable real-time tracking and management of key performance indicators, offering valuable insights into performance trends and areas for improvement. Next, we're a strategy partner. We help align individual and team goals with organizational objectives, ensuring everyone is working towards the same targets. Our third pillar is the change champion. We support organizations through periods of change with personalized coaching and on-demand support, helping employees navigate transitions confidently. Finally, we're a training support ambassador. We link post-training support directly to employees' goals, helping them apply new skills effectively. Coach Vici collaborates with organizations to establish overarching goals at each level: organizational, departmental, team, and individual. Coach Vici even offers users the opportunity to set their own personal goals independent of organizational objectives to support personal development and well-being. Let's explore how Coach Vici assists organizations in bringing their objectives to life. Your journey with Coach Vici begins with obtaining your unique user code via email. Once you enter this code, Vici guides you through a series of data protection measures. At the heart of Coach Vici lies the main menu. Here, you can explore all the fantastic features we offer to help you achieve your goals. First up, work on your goals. Set, work on, and track your goals seamlessly. Next, help me think. Get Coach Vichi's assistance in thinking through any complex challenges you might be facing. Then, inspire me. Receive an instant boost of motivation whenever you need it. Also, my profile, easily update your personal information. When you're done, that's it for now. End your session with Coach Vichi. Lastly, check in. Ready to interact with Coach Vichi again? Just check in. As more individuals and teams embrace Coach Vichi, its influence ripples throughout the entire organization. Coach Vichi's reporting capabilities provide organizations with invaluable insights to inform strategic decisions and drive performance. Coach Vichi brings focus, direction, and support to your organization at every level, driving professional growth and development. With Coach Vichi, leaders hold the power of a coach right in the palm of their hand.
Great. So I wanted to share that with you to show you what is currently commercially possible and available. So it's using coaching approaches embedded in a chatbot on top of a large language model, generative AI. And I think the exciting part of this is that suddenly everyone in the organization can get some form of coaching. It's not the same as top-level executive coaching, but it's some form of coaching. I think we're running out of time, but I wanted to just share with you. Yeah, I want to skip that. So in conclusion then, I think there's still several barriers to overcome, but we are creating good enough AI chatbot coaches to already make a significant impact on people who previously would not have any access to it. And through research, we have to understand what works and what doesn't work. And that's what I've made my life's mission. And I'm quite excited about the findings and what I'm seeing so far. In conclusion then, I think AI could democratize and scale coaching. It can give coaching to many more people than what we currently have. I think it can actually help us as human coaches. It can expand the need for human coaches. And I say that because once people get a taste of coaching through AI, they might want to get the real thing, right? Also, it can assist us in our practice. It'll make us better. It can expand our reach and how much we can do. And through training, for example, it can train coaches to be better coaches. So if you find ways of incorporating it into your practice, I think it could be beneficial. But I think some coaches should be concerned. You know, if you don't coach at a proper level and you're not well trained and you do grow coaching or basic goal setting coaching, then I can tell you now that the chatbot can already do that better than you, because it can embed the theory more and execute it more closely. So we have to keep improving ourselves in how we coach and the theoretical knowledge we have, and that thing that make us uniquely human. We urgently need standards to regulate AI coaching. I know that EMCC and ICF is working on that, but just like you can't call yourself a master practitioner if you're an AI, if you're a human coach, I don't want people to put coaching chatbots out there and say it's a coach if it hasn't gone through some regulation. So I foresee, I worked with the ICF, we created this framework to grade AI chatbot coaches so that it has to go through and get a stamp of approval. We need that. And there are multiple ethical challenges. For example, we spoke about biases in data. Privacy, where's the data stored? Who's got access to it? You know, is the AI coach programmed to manipulate? Who takes responsibility? And is the algorithm transparent? And there's the ethics side of this, I can do a whole talk on separately, but be aware of that. Finally, it's here whether you like it or not. It won't replace us, but I think it can help to improve previously excluded people. So it's good for the organization. It's good for you as a coach because it can help grow the need for coaching. Please engage with it, educate yourself, find ways of using it, understand it. And from my side, and if there are other academics in the room, and if you ever ask to participate, please do so. And let's research this and understand what really is possible. And that is the end of my story. I think I went slightly over time. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please scan the QR code. Otherwise, Nicola, I'm happy to conclude here.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that, Nicky. I've been looking at the chat as we've been going along as well. And thank you, everybody who's been putting in points in the chat. I was trying to work out the bits to bring forward, and there's just so much discussion there, which is absolutely fantastic. But I think if I could sum up the the questions in the chat. It would be along the lines of, just because we can, should we? The point you made about the ethical use there, I think was well made at the end there, Nicky. So all these considerations to continue to bear in mind. But I wonder, I can see that Matthew's hand is up, and we have got some time for questions, and so
Sure.
perhaps we can spend the next 5 minutes or so taking some questions.
Please, yeah, Matthew, please go ahead.
Question, I can see a mobile app on your website, and I like the way it says, I am a virtual coach. Well, I'm. Is the app available for just Android or Apple as well? I can't find it in the App Store.
Yeah, so our Coach Vici is not a B2C, it's not a consumer, it's where we sell it to companies. So if you're interested, you can contact us through the website. I can get the team to get in touch with you. But basically, how we currently work with coaches, if there are coaches who work in organizations and they already have exposure in an organization and they want to bring Coach Vici in as a support for what they do, we can do that. But please get in touch via the website, and we can certainly set up a demo and explore how Coach Vici could work with you in your current coaching practice for companies.
Very good. Excellent talk. Really interesting. I've been using ChatGPT for as long as I've heard about ChatGPT. And I love it. Wrote a song with it and everything, and used Udio to produce the music. And I just stuck it up on my website, even though my mother said not to. But I went along with it.
Wonderful. That's incredible, very powerful. Great to see that you're using it. I think it's sometimes I do these talks and some people haven't even used ChatGPT. So wonderful to see you using it.
Nicky. Hi, Nicky. Thanks for your presentation. In the last few months, Google's Gemini came under quite a bit of scrutiny, especially when it started showing some quite taboo results in the image domain. Within the realm of coaching, because of ethical considerations, we need to ensure that any safety concerns are mitigated, or if they do occur, that they're addressed in hindsight. And I'm wondering, considering that AI as a coach will probably be doing its thing autonomously, i.e. there's not going to be a man in the loop, how safety will be addressed?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And that is why we must be very careful when we start using AI coaches. There are some people or some companies that give platforms, or that allow people to build their own AI chatbot coaches, for example. And I have a little bit of a concern with that, because it's taken us many years to get to this point to understand what we can and cannot allow. So let's take chatbots, for example. There's a continuum. On the one extreme, you can have a scripted chatbot where absolutely everything, every response is pre-programmed. There's no generative AI involved, right? So you have complete control over this. That was the first iteration of Vici. And that gets kind of boring and repetitive, even though it's quite effective. And one of my studies show that it is as effective as generative in certain cases. The other extreme is if you write a large prompt, a 2-page prompt. For those of you who know what that is, to create this autonomous thing that stands on its own. And that can go off script and do some really strange things. And then there's somewhere in between where you keep control through some scripting, and in a very controlled way, using sound theories and models, academically researched. If you know what you're doing, you can contain that. And that is the approach we've taken with the new iteration of Coach Vici. So currently, I did a study where we compared a scripted chatbot with a partially generative AI chatbot. People find the generative one more fun to use, but interestingly, for goal setting, there was no difference between how people perceive it. So you can see the slight nuances about this, and that's why you must be very careful when you use these tools to understand where it comes from, who created them, and what the philosophy is. But I think, just a final one, there are dangers in generative AI for sure, but I think the upside is so immensely huge that we have to live with that, control it, rather than saying, let's not use it. I see a hand there from Yes, Pascal.
Hi. The yes is in anticipation of the breakout room, so not part of my name. Hi, Nicky, and thank you very much for this presentation. So very interesting. I wanted to quickly pick up on a point that was made about the democratizing coaching, and you brought the example of Malawi, and I have this physical reaction to it. I cringe because I think wouldn't it be much more useful and much more democratic and much more humanistic if we were training Malawi human beings to coach other Malawi human beings instead of bringing in machines? That's putting it
Absolutely.
crass, but
Absolutely, but how is that going to happen? And don't get me started. I'm a bit of a, not get me started, but a bit of an anti-capitalist, I guess. But unless people make money out of things, that it doesn't happen. So there's this beautiful story in Zimbabwe where there's also a shortage of psychologists and just what do you call it, counselors. And they've got this thing, granny benches. I don't know if you've come across that, where Gogo's grandmothers are trained in basic counseling skills. You can go sit next to her. So absolutely, I'm all in favor of humans first. But I think in absence of that, I could tomorrow use my chatbot and make it available through, to millions of people without any of that. So I take your point. I agree. I prefer humans as well. But
same effort, same money, same power of ideas, and we can make it happen. It's just a matter of wanting it, right? But thank you.
Willpower, absolutely. Yes.
We've unfortunately at time, and I can see Martine's and Crikey and Boskirt's hands up. I'd say hold on to them for the moment, because I think Nicky is available to stay for the networking part afterwards. Is that right, Nicky? You're here for another half an hour?
I can, yes, sure.
Marvelous. So perhaps we can pick these bits when we go to networking. But I know at the end of the kind of the scheduled time, and I just want to just say thank you so much, Nicky, for leading this conversation and for giving us such an insight into your work and what the current landscape is and what future landscapes could look like, and thinking about the ethics, about the usage of everything. I just wondered if we could just as like a last official question for me, if I could just capture from you some of the things that you yourself are taking from this dialogue.
Few things. I think the one is the immense interest, seeing so many people. It warms my heart to see that there's so many people interested, looking at the poll, and most people think it's positive. And then I think for me to also hear some of the questions and not critique, but some of the other side of what one should be aware of, to also maybe temper what I'm doing, so that it's not just all one-sided. Is sometimes you go off on a tangent, not bring the community with you. And every time I present to coaches, I'm reminded of the human side of it and the concerns, and for me to take that into account as I move forward with my AI coaching adventure. So thank you for the reflection opportunity.
Thank you, Nicky. Thank you. And thank you everybody here for just being here and being brilliant, and for being interested and engaged and helping to shape our future here, and shape and co-create our professional future, and also our ethical future and our humanity future as well, amidst the machine. So thank you everybody here as well.